So the first thing, get a bottle. I got this one because, well, I like the label on it. Sometimes I'll be covering it up and the label doesn't really matter. Other times I plan to incorporate it somehow. Like in this one here, where I'm going to try to find a way to maybe frame something around that label that's on it. Usually I'll put some sort of frame on there or maybe work it into the overall design. But of course, one of the things we're going to need is an air hole. If there's no air hole for more air to come in through the bottom as smoke rises out through the top, it'll go out. So we need to drill a little hole here. So for this, you can use a glass and tile bit set. They're pretty cheap, and I put a few pieces of tape over where I'll be drilling, kind of to keep that bit in place while it is kind of starting to dig in there. So you just kind of take your time, go from one bit to the next, and eventually you can get it big enough that it's about the size of a pencil, and it'll be able to pull in air for as the smoke's coming out the top. After that, we need to add something to get the paint to stick on the bottle. Because you could paint on glass, but it tends to sometimes flake off pretty easily. So I learned this trick a long time ago. Somebody just said to put some tape on it. So if you wrap a whole bunch of masking tape around it, it'll stick pretty well to the bottle, and then of course the paint will just stick to the tape. You can also put stuff underneath the tape, such as either more little bunches of tape here and there, or maybe some string, and it'll help put some more texture to it. But this is definitely the part that can be a bit time consuming. You just want to take the tape, work it in there as best as you can, kind of crisscross it around, and just a lot of little pieces here and there, and it kind of just holds on pretty well. It gives you something nice to be able to paint on top of. Even if you're not putting anything underneath it, having that little crisscross here and there all over it does still give you a little bit of texture and pattern for whatever you're painting on top of. So now I got to tape up the rest of it. So this is the finished product as far as once all the tape's on there, and I've kind of started to work a little bit of a frame around that label that I was wanting to keep. So I've already kind of planned out what I wanted to do for this. I already had a picture in mind, which is this one here. This is not original, of course. I printed this up on my printer, which is having some color issues. I believe it's by an artist named Leica. So I'll put some links about their pages in my video. This is also why I don't actually sell any of these. I just kind of make them for me, because sometimes I get the art from somewhere else. So I printed this one up black and white, glued it on there, and started to draw a little bit of this symbol around it, which I'm going to use Gorilla Glue to enhance. So that's just the little rebel emblem. And the Gorilla Glue puffs out a whole bunch, so it's really good for adding details like a frame around something or giving it a look of having wax dripping off. So as you can see here, it starts to puff up. Just keep an eye on it, because even though it puffs, it does drip a lot as well. So you want to make sure it doesn't drip too far out of line for what you're wanting to use it for. Can make it kind of tricky as you're trying to put more and more on there. Sometimes you have to use little bits of paper to kind of guide it into the place you want. So since this is black and white, also I don't really have good brushes, so I ended up using a Sharpie to put in the color that I wanted. I don't know how that's going to go with the polyurethane later, but I'll have to be pretty careful. Here's the finished Gorilla Glue. As you can see, I used it both for framing, for putting the emblem on there, the Rebel emblem, and as well as making that wax drip look happening from the top of the bottle. Yep, so I'm just kind of tossing it around here. This is what it looks like, and of course now I'm going to have to paint it, and that can take a lot of time. So I'm just going to set this up on the ground and see. Usually I kind of start with the Gorilla Glue parts of it. I'll paint that up first, because it's kind of, I like to get that out of the way and then kind of paint around it anywhere else. So I've already kind of decided what I want to do, just to put all the colors in place now. So I am going to have to do something about the marker that I used on her. I tested a piece of paper, and it didn't really work out that well when I put the polyurethane on it. I went ahead and did the white paint on this first, just to kind of get that out of the way. Normally I do the the Gorilla Glue first. But so here it is with some of the frame going around. I did like a black frame and a frame on that, and a black on that emblem. And I'm going to use some red for the top here as it drips down. Just kind of building a little bit of a color theme here. I always knew I was going to do one of these bottles pretty much white. And then, you know, I'd had to plan for this Princess Leia one for a while. I even had this bottle saved for a long time to use for this art project, if it can even be called art. But hey, you know, now once everything's done here, it can tend to look a little bit flat. As you can see here, it looks just like this really flat kind of image. But what I did was I put some pieces of tape over the Leia part that I colored with the marker, so that way I could put the polyurethane over it. Because without that tape, like I said, I tested it, and the polyurethane just made the ink just bleed through completely. So I'm glad that I tested it before actually trying to slather this thing with polyurethane. So this will keep that those marker parts intact. So now the polyurethane works pretty well. Works better than clear coat, but it does take a little bit longer to dry. Gives it a really nice sheen to it as well. And this is the finished product. I've probably made about 4 of these in the last couple of months. And, you know, I'd been planning this one for a while. I had the idea for this bottle well over a year ago. Even had that specific artwork of Leica to use for it as well. I just had that idea and had been sitting on the back burner, but hey, locked down during a pandemic and it's the holidays, let's make a bottle.